I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today, we are talking about AI, Artificial Intelligence, the 2001 film written by Steven Spielberg, screen story by Ian Watson, based on Super Toys Last All Summer Long by Brian Aldiss, and directed by Steven Spielberg. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello. What do you know?
And Alex Calleros.
Hi, mommy.
All right.
That was my best Heather Joel Osment, I guess.
All right, I'm uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this episode up.
Mission accomplished. All right. So, big swing summer. AI is a big swing. It is such a fascinating film. Actually, I'm going to read the Rotten Tomatoes critic consensus. I like a curious, not always seamless amalgamation of Kubrick's chilly bleakness and Spielberg's warm-hearted optimism. AI is, in a word, fascinating. I feel like that really captures this, where it is this weird, started to be developed by Kubrick, kind of got passed back and forth with him and Spielberg, and ended up in Spielberg's hands. You feel the remnants of what you can imagine are the more Kubrick big idea, uncomfortable, questioning philosophical things. And then you also have the Spielberg kind of saccharine, sweet child boy wonder with also everything's foggy and there's shafts of lights and everything's glowing. So like we have the Spielberg style with this weird subject matter. It's Pinocchio. It knows it's Pinocchio. They read Pinocchio. They tell you that it's Pinocchio. Structurally, we have 50 minutes with him and the family, like the kid, David, and the family. And then you're thrown into this crazy world, which isn't even hinted at really up until that point. So the movie takes this hard turn into sort of this weird, chaotic, almost Blade Runner-esque area for a while where you're hanging out with Jude Law and seeing all this. And then you go to Manhattan and you end up with John Hurt, who's the only man in this building.
No, the other
William
Hurt.
Sorry,
Yeah.
other Hurt. Who's the only person in this building, but he's going to be right back. He's going to get the whole team, but then he just appeared. No one's anyway. And then you go down in the water, and then 2,000 years pass, and aliens, I thought, but maybe actually they're advanced mechas, apparently. Yeah, didn't get that the first time. Find him, and this is a movie that is unlike any other movie before. And I remember watching it when I was, 15, whatever I was in 2001, and being so confused, excited because it was Spielberg and sci-fi and AI, and what's that going to be like? And then thrown for a complete loop by what it was and what it is. So it is absolutely a big swing, tries to do a lot of things. And part of the risk of taking a big swing is that when you miss, you're going to miss pretty dramatically. But we might not all agree that it missed. Alex, tell me what you think about AI, artificial intelligence.
I also saw this film when I was, 14. And it was one of those formative movie theater experiences where I saw a movie that made me feel really strange emotions. And, I was not, like you, I was not prepared to feel these strange emotions. I thought I was seeing a Steven Spielberg movie about AI starring Haley Joel Osment, fresh off of The Sixth Sense. And subject matter goes from very family friendly in a lot of ways to extremely adult very quickly. The sadness in this movie, the real bleakness is so extreme, but then also these moments of extreme Spielberg saccharine, as you called out, Michael. And just, the ending and the alien robot things, it was so unsettling and strange. So anyway, all that said, I feel like this movie is kind of evil. I remember hearing an interview with Ari Aster and when you're talking about Hereditary, which is another movie that I think is actually evil. And he was talking about that as an aspiration, where he says, oh, there's some movies you see them and there's something in them that feels wrong and like feels evil. And there's parts of this movie that kind of feel evil to me because it like lulls you in with that Spielberg warmth and kind of like you feel like you're a little bit in a safe Spielberg hands. And then it just takes you to the depths of like existential despair and sadness, like with a child who just wants like his mother to love him and is going to sit at the bottom of the ocean for 2,000 years staring at this face of a statue wanting to, like wishing for a thing. Anyway, very strange, sad movie, also hugely ambitious, and I really admire it a lot. Actually, I like the sequences are a complete like you're saying, we're thrown into these completely different movies at different stages of it. But those movies in and of themselves are like really crazy and really interesting and really daring. You know, the whole flesh fair sequences, whoa. You know, so I think I really admire the big swinginess of this movie. And as I was watching it, all those uncomfortable emotions were flooding back, but I was also kind of wowed by like the fact that this movie exists. Like this artifact is just really remarkable. So
yeah,
I don't know. Do I like it? Maybe. I admire it, I think.
Okay. Brian, you own a copy of this on Blu-ray. You showed us.
I do, but if you are watching on YouTube, that's not saying much.
He has a few Blu-rays.
Yeah.
He has a few Blu-rays behind.
Yeah, it's funny because we were on our Patreon film club last weekend, and we were talking, we're going to talk about AI next, which, by the way, join us. And you guys were kind of like snickering, like, oh, AI, and I hadn't rewatched it yet. And I was like, I like this movie. What's everyone? Is it not as good as I remember or whatever? And then just rewatching it now, I'm just like, oh, I just didn't remember how weird it is, and it's like, it's not just weird like all the things that you said, Michael, of like what the actual plot is. It's just weird in terms of like what movies are, the sort of character motivations and the pacing, and sometimes what feels like a lack of structure, but then I think when you zoom out far enough you can kind of see that it's there. That was just really weird, and like the melodrama of it all, and as you said, the Spielberg like washed, like this is his Vaseline phase between this, Minority Report, and Catch Me If You Can. It's just everything is like whoops, I left Kleenex on the lens for 3 movies. And I remembered the plot pretty well, so that wasn't weird to me. It was just weird what the movie was trying to be as a movie. It doesn't feel like Kubrick. It doesn't feel like Spielberg, other than maybe like Minority Report Spielberg, which is right in the same year. And Spielberg will talk about some of the more saccharine ideas were Kubrick's and some of the darker ideas were Spielberg. So it's like even that, it's like there was always the like urban legend that Kubrick's version ended at the bottom of the sea, and then Spielberg was like, well, I'm going to make a third act. It's like, no, that was always there. So it's just all very strange. I think like the first act, I was like, oh man, this is I'm not really liking the way that these characters work, and then once we kind of got out into the world, I was into it more. I was like, oh, this is like a fun, like not quite as cool as Blade Runner, but not quite as silly as Fifth Element, but I like both those movies a lot, so it's kind of somewhere in there. And then I just think by the end it was all sort of like, okay, like the credits rolled, and I was like, I didn't feel like, oh man, like at the end of Interstellar, I'm like, you know what? Despite all the bumps, what a good time, At this, I'm just like, movie's over. I guess that happened. And I think ultimately I would say I like this movie, but it was sort of strange. It is the best way to describe a movie that I've seen a couple times, revisiting and just being like, what is this?
Indeed. It is very strange. Trisha, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. I have so many. I saw this movie for the first time in 2019 because a friend of the show and old friend of mine, Sean Eastridge, who hosts the podcast Missing Frames, learned that I had never seen this movie in 2019, despite being a massive Spielberg fan. And so he decided to help me remedy that problem. If you don't know, that's what the podcast Missing Frames is about. It's seeing movies that you should have seen by now in your life. And so that was AI for me. So I watched it, and then I discussed it with Sean on that show at length. And that was the only other time previous to this that I've seen it. I had a strong reaction on the show. You can go ahead and listen to it. It aired in May 2019. But then I kind of forgot about this movie after having been through that experience on that show. And watching it this time, I think I hate it. Like I really think I hate this movie. I had a much worse time the second time around, like, to an astonishing degree. I was so angry at it being what it is, which is just like in spite of all of the big swinginess of it, which on paper I admire, it simply isn't a movie in so many other ways. And yet it like demands to be seen as like fascinating. And like that was the word. It's funny that that's what the word is on Rotten Tomatoes. That was the word that Sean and I settled on at the end of that Missing Frames podcast as well. We're like, damn, this movie's fascinating. And now I'm like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's just not. It's just a mishmash of Pinocchio and Spielberg and Kubrick and super toys and robots and like themes that are not themes because characters are not characters when they're robots acting the way that robots are programmed to act. That's not a character arc. And I just like, in spite of the like strong plot device of having a character who clearly wants something and goes on a journey to get it, that feels like a story. And I understand why you're compelled to see if he's going to reach the blue fairy or what he is going to reach at the end of this quest. It's also impossible to get hooked into, at least for me, for a wide variety of reasons. It's worth noting, I've had 2 children since I watched this in 2019. And so I am now having 2 boys yelling mommy at me for most of my life. And the experience also, the like portrayal of parenthood and childhood, boyhood, is so wrong and upsetting to me that I think I just hate it. So that's where I am. I think it's still worth discussing. I'm happy to be here.
What if you just got up and left?
I think the storytelling ultimately doesn't amount to anything for me that I can latch onto at all. So here we are.
I think I'm a little bit in the Trisha boat as
Thank
well. But this is where good conversations come from, is from conflict and taking different angles on it. And yeah, so I think I'm glad you called out, Brian, the sort of interesting character motivations, the sort of structure of it, the pacing. I feel like all of those things are just a little off or a lot off and add to this feeling of it being like wrong. But there are interesting kind of questions being suggested and hinted at that I think are intellectually stirring. And because there is this Spielberg, emotional storytelling happening, there are moments that are signaling to me that I'm like feeling emotions, and like there are scenes and moments where I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that situation, that's really interesting. What is that saying? But it does not feel like the sum of its parts is not greater than its parts. Its parts are very strange. Some of the parts I think are interesting, and I can definitely see why they resonate with people. And it is fascinating. And so I think thinking about it intellectually, I see the value in that. But in terms of like, this is a movie that told a story, I think it is pretty bad if you were to judge it on that scale.
Mm-hmm.
But it also feels like maybe it's not interested in being a normal movie, which I guess makes it okay. Alex, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I think in some ways I don't even watching it this time. It didn't feel like one movie at all. It felt kind of like a collection of different movies, different short stories or chapters or episodes that don't really all need to be in this order. Or like, I mean, there is the end goal that we know is fake and not real of meeting the blue fairy. So I agree with you, Trisha. It's very hard to get invested in David's quest because I don't know what that even means. And like, yeah, I don't know what it means to meet an imaginary character. And I guess when he gets to the end of his journey in Manhattan, there's kind of an explanation of you've proven that you're human because you are chasing a dream that isn't real, and that all feels very convenient. Where they somehow hacked Mr. No to get him. Anyway, a lot of strange plot devices.
They put a riddle into Robin Williams and told him to do it. Yeah,
which was a very startling cameo, and not the only one.
Yeah,
considering he was just in Bicentennial Man 2 years prior, which is about a robot who wants to be a real boy.
Right.
Anyway, sorry. All that said, I think each individual piece of this movie I like better than the whole movie, and I like some of those pieces more than others. So I think I find it interesting when we do enter, like you said, Brian, that Blade Runner world. I love when we just cut to Jude Law in his everyday life as the robot gigolo, and that scene didn't with his like female client didn't play for me really when I was 13, but it was a really interesting scene watching it as an adult. And I just think there's these world building elements in that sequence, the flesh fairs, the kind of discarded robots that are searching for parts and getting taken up into this kind of like racist against robots KKK kind of a situation. That's really interesting. I think interesting world building. It feels like a completely different movie from what you said was the first 50 minutes, Michael, which has within it like strange, almost like comedic montages. There's like a comedic montage where Monica is trying to almost like test if she wants to keep David, and there's kind of like a goofy, like he's always standing there and he's always there, and it's kind of creepy but kind of funny.
Like, make the bed and you toss the sheet up and it comes down and he's there.
Yeah.
Why would he move that quickly? Why would he do that?
So it's like that movie has all these elements that are trying to be kind of, here's a fun thing for the family viewers. But then we have the like dark sex worker, Blade Runner, flesh fair worlds. And yeah, I think these are all interesting worlds to explore and movies to explore. And I like these sci-fi ideas and these situations. But it is very strange to have them all in a row in a movie. And yeah, the transition is so wild where she just says to him, when Monica drops off David, she says, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the world." And I'm like, Steven Spielberg, yes, I'm glad you're sorry. Yeah, like, because it would have been interesting to have a little hint of like, virtualize David, or if they're out and about, if she ever takes David out to the mall or something, and there's a hint of a darker world out there, that'd be interesting foreshadowing. We've talked about foreshadowing recently on the podcast. Like that is good usually. And this movie has no foreshadowing about that second act.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I've brought up quite a bit is the idea of these movies that feel like they should be limited series in some way, and it's often these movies that are 2.5+ hours and they're trying to do a whole lot. So it feels like it's 4 hours of story. It's shoved into 2.5 hours. And like, I've never felt that more than this movie. It feels like 4 episodes. It's like watching 4 Bond movies back to back, like older Bond movies where you're like, well, it's the same character, but like he's on the moon now, I guess. Like what, why not? And it does feel like, one, from just as you were saying, Alex, these feel like almost like 4 disparate kind of stories that were being told starring the same character. But also because of how fast the pacing is and how sort of unmotivated a lot of the stuff is. So I'm just like, episode 1. Actually, remind me, I didn't think of this before. 1 year later, Spielberg would make Taken, the I think it was 2002. The Dakota Fanning as an alien baby 10 episode. But every episode of that series, I have that behind me too. Every episode of that is 90 minutes, and it's like 10 episodes long. So it's like it crosses generations. You have lots and lots of time to get into all this. But also, it's just like, episode 1, a family is going to get a robot boy. The mother's going to essentially fall in motherly love with it. And by the end is going to abandon it. Like, that's the story you're telling in episode 1. Tell that story, do whatever you need to tell that story. Now, episode 2, we move on to the next. We move on to the flesh fair. We move on to this, right? As opposed to what happens a lot of time in these movies, and the reason I keep bringing up this pacing thing is we got to get to Act 2, so we got to brush over a lot of this stuff, as opposed to we're going to spend this entire hour, however long we have to tell this one story. This isn't even the story yet, so we got to barrel through all this stuff before we get to the next thing, so it just makes this very quirky, read to us, sure. Cut to they're on a boat reading Pinocchio. Like, what? Wait, what? There's a boat?
They've never been outside before. Now they're on a boat
right.
in a lake. Yeah.
It's just a lot of that weird kind of out of nowhere stuff, and yeah, that's what happens, I think, when you are just rushing your story.
Yeah. I'm with you, and I like that idea of if you really want to go to all these different places, then maybe take some more time with all of them, and also build in credible story world building, kind of create, a texture, an internal logic for these various phases of the thing. And, as you mentioned, there's just not enough time to build an on-ramp to some of these ideas of what the world is. And I do think that that's a problem. I also think, though, that, genre and tone aside, which the 4 movies that you're identifying, or the 4 episodes of this movie, have wildly different genres and tones, which I think is a real problem and feels like whiplash when you watch it. But even if you set all of that aside, I think you have character problems here,
sure.
Deep, fundamental character problems. So, thinking about it this time, I was like, okay, the first time I went into this, I was expecting more of a story arc where David, the central character, is essentially indistinguishable from a human in every meaningful way, right? Where he has all this agency, he has intelligence, he has emotionality. He's something closer to a Blade Runner android that doesn't even know it's an android, right? And actually in the original short story, the David character doesn't know that he is not a human child, which I think would make a real difference here. But so the first time I watched it, I was so thrown by how robotic he is.
Right.
When she first gets him, he's truly just on Sean's podcast, I said he was a Roomba, which is what he really reminds me of. But he truly is just nothing more than a robot. And then even once he imprints on her, he still isn't a human in a lot of ways. The robotness is extremely visible. His programming is extremely visible. And even when you feel like you maybe can forget that fact, the movie makes sure to remind you because he's full of spinach or whatever.
Horrifying.
It's super horrifying, but it's just the movie wants you to remember, right? The reason he pulls Lizzie McGuire's brother into the pool is because he is somebody's putting a knife on his arm, and his programming kicks in, and he snaps into a safety mode or whatever it is. And so
whatever it is means the movie never told us.
Right,
that wasn't set up for us to be oh, of course he did that thing.
Absolutely.
Right.
But he's acting so robotic. I'm okay, that's fine. Yeah. But that being said, so if you're expecting a movie about sort of this philosophical, what does it mean to be human movie that you might expect about an AI or an android, then this isn't that. And it tells you right out of the gate it isn't going to be that. So then you go into it, if you're me, expecting more of a flat arc where okay, he can't change because he has programming and he is a robot, but perhaps he will change the whole world around him. No, it's not about that either, actually. And so there is not a meaningful character journey to speak of. There's a physical journey from A to B, and B being the blue fairy in the bottom of the ocean. And then he gets, pulled out of that and whatever, ends up with his resurrected mom for a day. There's a timeline shift and like a geographical shift in the story. But he's so singular of purpose from the minute he imprints on Monica that he never changes in any way. And also the world kind of doesn't change around him that much, at least not in terms of like theme and what the movie's about, because I really couldn't detect a theme this time around in any way.
Yeah. I think there is some perspective stuff that's weird here.
Yeah.
Where, because I was feeling similar to you, what do you want me to feel about this character movie? Because sometimes you're acting like you were suggesting, Trisha, the first version, which is like, oh, this is a real boy. Like, he's made of mechanical parts, but I'm supposed to think of this person as a real child that wants to live and survive, and I should be rooting for him. Some of the time, the movie is using its filmmaking and its music to signal that. And then at other times, it's very clearly shooting him through these distorted windows and like playing creepy
horror stuff.
Right. Like, you should be creeped out by this, audience. And so it's doing both of those things a lot of the time, which is fascinating, but isn't enough to sustain like a story. And I think it's also perspective wise, I don't know who I'm supposed to be seeing him through, whose eyes I'm supposed to be seeing him through, or if I'm supposed to be seeing the world through his eyes, like a Forrest Gump or a Benjamin Button, like that
right.
kind of
that was who
arc.
I thought of, or like a
Right.
being there, right? That's a flat arc.
Right, where it's like this character, we're going to follow it, and through their eyes, we see vignettes and see other characters change and react, and the world changes around them, like you're saying. And we get maybe a little bit of that with the Jude Law character, which is maybe why I enjoy that character the most, because it feels like maybe there's something there. But just like sometimes we're with Monica, but for a little bit we're with the dad, but sometimes we're with David, sometimes we're with Jude, sometimes we're with Teddy. There's also like extreme inconsistencies around like intelligence and what it means. Teddy seems to be way smarter than David, than kind of
Right.
actually everybody in the movie. So like why? So yeah, there's rule inconsistencies over there, but I think the perspective inconsistency also leaves me totally untethered about what this movie wants me to be feeling at any given time.
I feel like all this is reminding me or making me think of why I called this movie evil. And I think part of it is there's almost a cruelty in it where, yeah, it's not about David changing the world or changing hearts and minds or growing or evolving past the programming that he's given. It's ultimately a movie about kind of how cruel and awful this programming is, which is to essentially take this robot intelligence and give it this insane drive to be loved by one specific human who will definitely die or abandon it. And then we just watch it suffer for like the rest of the movie until some like 2,000 years in the future, silicone species robots temporarily resurrect the mother for 24 hours so he can like feel love once before he like shuts down and dies. So it's like, it just feels kind of like there is no greater purpose in this movie than essentially watching a robot suffer because of a bad idea of how to program a robot.
Well, and, I've heard it suggested by reviewers and by Sean and I, we kind of arrived at this place when we talked about it a few years ago. If the suggestion thematically is that what it means to be human is to be mortal, right? And being informed by your own mortality is what makes us human. And that's kind of what the ending suggests, where he like dies, I guess, next to his mom who's dying. And look, he's a real boy now.
And poor Teddy is stuck there also.
Like,
Yeah.
this movie's evil. Like, Teddy is now in a simulacrum built by future robots in an ice age, sitting on a bed next to two dead people. Like that's like his happy ending as the lights turn out. Like with the sweet John Williams music.
Mm-hmm.
I do love the score. That's actually my favorite part of this movie. The score. But if that's sort of the thematic suggestion at the end, then it needs to actually be about that all along, right? Like, shouldn't the idea of mortality be introduced earlier? It's brought up briefly when he like is looking at his mom in the mirror when she's getting ready to go out, and he's like, "Mommy, will you die?" And you know, she ends up having to tell him yes, and she says, "But I'll live 50 years. Is 50 years a long time, Teddy? I don't think so." And then, you know, there are some moments throughout where they kind of talk about time. But there's, you know, Monica at that point has totally disappeared from the movie. We don't really hear much about death. And also, if it's death and how death informs the human experience, then I would love to hear more about that also, right? Like, people living to life to the fullest because they know they're going to die, or the way that, you know, we love each other in spite of death, whatever that is. At the end of the movie, the higher intelligence arrives and is like, "We're obsessed with human people because they made art and stuff." And I'm like, "No, you're not. Why would you be? That's very silly. If that's what is the scene that's going to tie the movie all together, then have the higher intelligence explain that humans being bound by time and these like finite lifespans, and yet creating X, Y, and Z for future generations, or whatever it is, art about life, art about love. Explain it, tie it all together a little bit more for me, and also have the B plot and C plot, if there is one, also be about death. So, like, Jude Law's character gets accused of a murder and then thinks about that not at any other point in the movie, although the police keep chasing him. If robots could commit murders, don't you think they would get framed for them more often? Like, I don't know. I can't even with that side plot. But again, why is it not a much bigger part of the text thematically if that's what the movie is about?
Yeah. Well, and I don't think the movie is about any one thing, and
It
that's
sure
kind
isn't.
of the problem, because we also at the Flesh Fair see that robots do die all the time, and there's some lines in there that kind of suggest like they're threatened by us because we're going to be here long after they're gone.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea. I would love it if the movie was about that.
And it kind of is, because it shows that like robots inherit the earth, if you understand that the
Right.
aliens are robots.
Right, which I did not until I read the summary on Wikipedia.
Right. Yeah, real quick, I was watching this kind of a retrospective of the movie, and it was talking about like the robots, you know, the sort of thematic statement by that one person in the William Hurt room who's like, if they could truly love us, would we love them though? Like, would we have any reason to, you know? And then you know, this person pointed out that like the robots do get loved in return, but just by other robots, right? So it's like when you see the Flesh Fair sequence, it's like they are all supporting each other. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not super there, but it's interesting. And how they never attack humans. They're just there. They're just trying to survive. They're not trying to fight back, right? And then Jude Law's whole monologue, that's why they hate us. You know, we're, like you said, we're going to be here long before. So then what if the future mechas, which were, one, better described as that, and two, we're sort of like thematically tying that all together in a way of like they've been wrestling with it the whole time. Like we are made by this species who seem to hate us and just use us for their own enjoyment, and yet they did, as you were saying, Trisha, like, and yet they did, you know, were able to create beauty and all these things we weren't able to. So we want to bring your mother back because we want to see this thing, this emotion that that we're not fully able to interpret, whatever it is, right? But where it feels like all those loose thematic threads are actually being like pulled together at the end. I like, sometimes that happens where a movie, I'm like, what is this movie about? And then at the end, it like somehow magically ties it all together, where I'm like, oh crap, I had no idea this B plot over here, or, you know, this act and that, whatever it is, all actually were part of a bigger picture. Or somebody came along in the script doctor process and did it in a page.
Yeah, I think it's a really bumpy monologue by the alien robot. when he comes into the door, knock on the door, it's like, hey, mommy. And it's like, nope, it's still the tall alien, gray alien robot.
Kingsley.
He's going to kind of dip
Yeah.
into the room under the door frame, sit with you on the nice little seat. Anyway, that is a bumpy monologue. It's interesting from like a sci-fi perspective, all the sci-fi details it gets into. It's pretty convoluted. But I agree with you, Brian. There's a missed opportunity there because I think we've pretty universally seen humans being awful in this movie.
Yes.
And so it feels really discordant where he's like, we're so jealous of that spark, that is soul, that is spirit. You know, it's just like, what? I think there's something really, could be really interesting if like you said, they were grappling with this, you know, their creators, who were they seemed to hate us, but they also had all these other things about them that were admirable. And we would like to bring them back, but there's like no traces of them left. And your mother's hair allows us to do an experiment where we see a human for a day. I don't know. You could have made it so it's not like you have to explain all these details of sometimes we have bone fragments or these things. And like we've done experiments to try to see in space-time if we can, you know, in space-time they leave an imprint. Like there's so many details there that maybe it's just like, yeah, it's still a weird ass ending. But if this piece of hair is the only organic matter left of any human, and then they use it to make his mom for that ending. Anyway, I'm trying to script doctor an ending which maybe can't be script doctored. But I do think there is a way that could have done a little more thematic tying together of it all, and concluded with them kind of wanting to see his mother as like the robots want to understand humans finally. Could have been a really interesting conclusion.
I'm glad you brought up, Brian, that opening scene, because that opening scene is pretty extended. Actually, it's a pretty long scene with them in this conference room, and yeah, introduces a lot of ideas. And at first, I was like leaning forward because I'd forgotten about this scene, and I was thinking,
Same.
oh, this is great, like theme stated. Let's get into it. You're going to tell me what this movie is about, and then we're going to like make a movie about it. And that it ultimately doesn't do that. Like some of those ideas, as we're talking about, do get paid off or, you know, explored a little bit. But I feel like that is a good example of what a cool framing scene can do right at the beginning of your story. It's like introduce this idea up front, tell the audience, this is what we're going to be talking about. Pay attention to these things. And that's makes me frustrated thinking about it, because I feel like there was so much potential lost in that and feels so disconnected from where the movie ends. But I did want to just call out that I think that's a cool way to begin a movie, is to introduce these ideas up front and directly, and then you can turn and start focusing on your characters and stuff. But like, doesn't hurt to have a scene that tells the audience what the movie's about, especially if the movie then goes on to be about those things.
Undress.
Well, I'm gonna do a good faith reading of this opening scene, because I do think in some ways it is what the movie's about. I think you see these humans, I think they're framed in a pretty awful way, because it's like they're kind of laughing and chuckling as he like stabs her hand and, you know, undress, you know, ha ha ha. So you see that they devalue, you know, this thing that looks like a human, that is a, you know, artificial intelligence. They are playing with it like it's a toy, and you know, and maybe that's the appropriate way to treat a computer. It looks like a human, so we as audience members feel some sympathy for it. But I think humans are introduced in that scene as being both kind of grandiose, and the William Hurt character has these big ideas that sound noble, and yet his treatment of this female robot feels kind of icky. And then you have that woman who is also great in Magnolia.
Yeah.
What's that actress's name? Anyway,
Yeah, everybody's in that scene also. Like there's so many people. Like Clark Gregg, I was able to like recognize from voice and the back of his head. I was like, oh, that's him.
And it's like, it's what I call a pre-cameo, because it feels like Spielberg is purposefully hiding his face, because as his head turns, the camera's like, we're not going to let you see him because your mind's not going to be able to.
Because it's Clark Gregg.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that woman brings up the idea of what is our responsibility to a machine who we do this to, essentially, that we imprint them to love us unconditionally. What's our responsibility to that? And I do think that ultimately is kind of what the movie is about. But once again, it's just in a flat way of just seeing the result of that process, a little boy kind of suffer and like go on a fruitless quest and then fall into the ocean and freeze. Yeah, it's just like watching that thing, the fallout of that choice without much payoff.
Yeah. Well, and one of the most interesting ideas that's brought up in that opening scene is, he's presenting the idea of creating a child robot, which apparently no one had ever done before. And he frames it as being a remedy for like human loneliness, right? Or like this longing that we have to have something that will love us. And I think that's really fascinating. And I think allegorically, the movie has the potential to explore what you're talking about, our responsibility, both to machines possibly that we create, but also to other things that we kind of consider to be lesser life forms, right? Like animals or human children or the natural world, a wide variety of things that we do have a responsibility to, and sometimes use them for our own selfish reasons, right? I think that if this movie were a straight ahead allegory about that, it would be really fascinating and rich for study. One of my favorite things about sci-fi is when it understands itself as allegory, where, AI and robot characters in sci-fi typically represent actual people who are being discriminated against, or other things that are falling victim to social structures. And so, like, if you look at Blade Runner in both of the Blade Runners, actually, there's a very clear message here about people who are being treated as second-class citizens, and it's this movie, because of the choice to essentially make the David character a robot, it's kind of hard to read it on an allegorical level because it's so literal. And it insists on being literal for so much of the movie. There are other times where I think the allegory is kind of there. And by making it a child, it's inviting also to be read as allegorical about parent and child relationships. But this is not any sort of depiction. It like almost never blurs the lines of a real parent and child relationship because David is a robot. And so like I'm confused as to, I know when you're adapting material, you end up having to really rework it. We've talked a lot about adaptation recently. But I don't understand the choice here to change that aspect of the David character. Why not make him basically a human child? An unaging human child, but basically a human child, and then use the film as a lens through which to explore society's responsibility to children. I would love to see that movie be allegorically like layered. And instead, I can't read it that way. It's just literal. There's no allegorical way to read it because if you read it allegorically, it stops making sense.
And I think, because he's so clearly a robot and reminded so frequently of his kind of simplistic programming, honestly.
Yeah.
Then, his quest and achieving his goal has this hollowness to it because it's an incredibly simple programming decision to make him like hopelessly imprinted to Monica, and it's just literally like you're saying about that, and there's no larger allegory to be found from him being a more three-dimensional character. He is this one-dimensional machine on a mission.
Well, and actually, when the movie in its first very long act is this family drama, there are times when he does have, if he feels almost like a human child, especially when the brother wakes up and he's like, oh no, now there's a real their real son is back. And you kind of see, the dad brings it up where he's like, well, he's programmed to love. Could he also not then hate? Like, is jealousy not also possible for him? And so I think that there are times when the movie is inviting you to say, well, like, oh, this is a family drama. Why don't we like talk about this as like a family problem, or, like parent-children things. And then it just completely isn't about that ever again, because then it's, again, you just get into this like plot machinations that can't happen unless he's literally a robot, and he has to literally be a robot. And so then I don't know. It's not watchable. It's not watchable.
Well, I think as we've called out, the problem is that this movie is both of those things some of the time.
Yep.
And I think there is something interesting about the version where he is just a robot. I think there is a compelling story, and there are compelling scenes in this movie about the human capacity for empathy and, I can never
anthropomorphizing.
Thank you.
Kind of, at the flesh fair, it's kind of a weird scene.
Amphibicopter is the word you're looking for.
Yes, right. Amphibicopter, which they say a lot. But right, no, we see that with Monica, right, at times, that it's her need to love something and feel loved is fulfilled briefly by this, doll, potentially. That's an interesting thing. And then, like you were saying, Alex, the flesh fair, I think, is a weird example that shows that humans do care about robots as long as they look like children. Like,
right.
And it's the 180 that happens is not really believable for me. And like, there's just that one really sweet, nice dad that's just like the most like nicest Spielberg dad who works at the flesh fair with his little daughter. Like, I wanted to punch him in the face. It was so annoying. But that's an interesting aspect to this story, and that could be explored in this vignette, and again is briefly, but then kind of doesn't go anywhere, where humans, it almost feels like, is this going to start a change? Are people going to start looking at these robots differently because of this? And then we don't know, we move on, and then we never follow it again. And it's just interesting that this story is kind of dipping its toes into different versions of the robot story thing. And it's also interesting to think about how many movies that came before this, but also since, have dealt with this. And, we've had Westworld, we have Ex Machina, Blade Runner sequels, all these things that I feel like have been better about kind of picking a lane. And I think that's ultimately what I needed from this movie, is to pick a lane of what is the story, what is the allegory, what is the aspect of the human condition that you are trying to dramatize and expose, because you're kind of working against yourself scene to scene in a lot of ways.
Yeah, now that I'm kind of thinking about, these episodes that we've been breaking down, it's almost like, they're different ideas and themes about using a robot as allegory. And so we have the family drama, as you're saying, Trisha, in the first one, if that added up to anything, something about sibling rivalry and a mother having to choose or whatever. And then the second story seems to be about humans caring about appearance and about like the anthropomorphizing. Like, that is actually, like, we're so surface level as humans, like that's what will get us to sympathize, but we'll just like massacre things that don't look pretty to us, whatever. So something about dark human nature there, and also the sex worker situation and all that. That's interesting. The Manhattan little segment is also very strange, because for a character who's really just been on this trajectory of I want my mother to love me, it now gets into kind of existential, there's more than one of me questions. And that whole kind of horror sequence where like the child beats another child's face in and then chops his head off. But like,
he starts asking all of a sudden if he's special. Like that suddenly becomes a theme somewhere around there. Where
one of a kind.
I'm the only one. I'm special. Yeah, that was never really an issue for him before. And that's also just more tonal whiplash, because like he just destroyed another unit, a child that apparently is modeled after William Hurt's deceased child. He just beat that like replica of the child to death and knocked his head off, and it just rolls over William Hurt, and he's like, "You made it, welcome." It's like,
And that other
what?
child feels so much more human
Right.
than
He does.
David.
That
It's
other
like,
one was like more advanced and like definitely more on his way to being like not a creepy robot.
right.
Yeah,
But maybe he doesn't dream, I guess.
right. And then and then that sequence is just so bizarre, as you said in the opening, Michael, when William Hurt's just like, I'm gonna gather all the people.
Bye.
I just exits the movie almost as if it was all like a trick to get him to walk into the Hall of Horrors to like see
Right.
his other selves on meat hooks, and
Or is it
like
a dream? Like
Yeah.
the way it's shot, the way it feels
Yeah.
dreamlike, but that
the
doesn't
like
make
boxes with the boy and girl robots in them, and then one of them starts shaking like horror
Moves?
movie style,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
gonna bust out.
Forgot
Like,
about that.
what is this movie? So yeah, that's a whole different movie there, where it's about a really creepy, like maybe about to go psycho child robot who's like killing his doppelgangers and having an existential crisis, and then essentially like takes his own life jumping off a building. Like really dark, really strange stuff.
But then
Fish.
he
The
sees the blue fairy and he's
Yeah.
right back to her. Oh, there she is. She's been here all along.
Right.
I'm just gonna pray to her for 2,000 years. Well, and one of the things that I mentioned on that podcast that I did with Sean, but I thought about it again this time too, is like a movie with a child protagonist. I'm expecting some kind of coming of age, disillusionment, like move from a simplistic way of thinking of the world to a complex way of thinking of the world. And so like I'm at every turn expecting David's disillusionment, and like finally he gets to the blue fairy. He prays for 2,000 years. It's like, yeah, immediately after he tried to end his existence by jumping off a building, he immediately gets right back into the, oh no, wait, this is going to fix all my problems. He prays to her for 2,000 years. Then they pull him out of the ice. He walks up to her. She cracks and crumbles.
This movie is evil.
And I'm like,
This is what I'm saying.
okay, now he's disillusioned and he's going to move into a complex way of thinking about the world of like, oh, I've been programmed this way the whole time. Nope. They're like, he's like, I still want my mom. And they're like, well, she's going to die in 24 hours. She's like, I still want my mom. Like, there's literally never any deviation. There's no disillusionment. This is not a human child. This is not about anything. This is not about the human experience. This is about a robot, and that's all it's about.
Here's a holographic blue fairy to keep the conversation going. Yeah.
Meryl Streep also playing.
I was gonna
the
say,
player.
like, this is probably my favorite Meryl Streep, Chris Rock movie.
Oh my god, yeah, the Chris Rock robot.
God.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
man.
And then the kids in the thing that take them to Rouge City.
Oh yeah, the guy from Entourage. Yeah.
Entourage.
Yeah.
So much.
And the guy from
There's-
Roseanne. Yeah.
And the last line also is something like he returned to where like dreams are made of or come
like
from or something.
it's almost he finally went to sleep and dreamt for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, thematically, you would think that would be like the line that makes it all click together. And
The aha,
is that,
yeah.
Right.
yeah, is that saying that like humans can dream because we die, and so he gets to die, and now he gets to dream? Like,
Yeah.
what does it mean?
What's gonna happen to Teddy?
And what's gonna happen to Teddy? The only person I cared about in this movie.
Another evil moment when he's like, David, I'll break, and then falls off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's like, what?
I feel like he says that multiple times
Yeah.
too, and the
Just like-
performance is so like, yeah, like Teddy has seen some shit. I don't know. It's intense.
Yeah, Teddy has really been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some lines too, like silly man. Of course, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's poor actors. Why don't we
Let's
go
go
around?
for a drive in the country.
What lessons are we going to take away from AI, artificial intelligence? Alex, what's your lesson?
Well, I mean, the lesson I had written down, which I was counting on, we kind of already talked about, but maybe I'll double down on it, which is the opening scene. I do think is a really good opening scene. And even the transition out of it was making me feel like, ooh, I'm in really good Spielberg hands. I'm excited for this movie, rewatching it, because You've got the female mecha who is kind of just being used as a doll and a toy and kind of an object of amusement and a demonstration. Undress for us, ha ha ha. You can stop now. And I thought there was something almost really interesting right up front where she's ending the scene putting on makeup, and we hard cut to Monica in a car putting on makeup. And so like that already is signaling to me, oh, something interesting here about just different statuses of different people in society and the expectations put on them and the male gaze. And there was so much there that was so rich already. And so I don't know what the lesson is besides that was a really good opening for a really interesting movie that I agree goes in a million directions and doesn't cohere. But I think, having that kind of philosophical discussion in that room with that mecha at the center of it, and all the subtle ways we see the humans treat the mecha while being kind of high-minded in their ideals was a really interesting contrast. And then coming out of that, already making interesting parallel connections between the treatment of mechas and the treatment of people. A lot of stage setting that got me very excited. And so I think if the movie had carried through with those things, would have been awesome. But I think any great movie has a great opening scene usually that does that stage setting and we've talked about teaches you how to watch it. This movie's first act does not teach you how to watch it. It teaches you how to watch a very different movie than the one we end up in. But I think that it got to a great start, and I think it's a really good opening.
Yeah.
And and a theme is stated. What responsibility do we have to these innocent things that we know love us?
Yeah. Cool. Trisha, what's your lesson?
Oh boy. I like Jude Law in this movie. I think I want to watch the Gigolo Joe movie. Like
100%.
I would watch that movie. Like, and his whole like the murder mystery, aspect of it. I mean, I guess it's her husband or like her partner that killed her because he was mad that she was seeing a robot sex worker. But like, I don't know. I like if the whole movie was just kind of about that, I think it would be a really interesting movie. And it's kind of Blade Runner-y, and like I feel like we've seen it before. And obviously, for what it's worth, I read the short story back in 2019 before I discussed this movie on Missing Frames, and it's not in any way about the larger story world around any of this. Like it's purely the family drama piece. It's really just about David and Monica and Henry, I guess is the husband's name, and then Teddy, the super toy. And so I think it's really, it injects so much energy into the movie in the second act to have the Jude Law character there for David to talk to and to, basically take this really, really innocent character and make it believable that he can like navigate the story world. And I overall really like the performance. I think he has so many interesting like little lines and things to say about like what humans are and what he thinks about them, his experiences with them. And I think it makes the movie like fun for a while to have that character in there. And so just, I guess my lesson about the power of a great supporting character was well played here. And so, yeah, I guess if you're gonna do like essentially this kind of Forrest Gump like kind of construction, it's smart to have kind of a supporting character. I guess in Forrest Gump that's probably Lieutenant Dan in the middle act of the movie. But yeah, it's fun to have somebody for the main character to talk to and that has a more more complex or just more savvy view of the world than the innocent
more
central
worldly
character. Yeah, more worldly. Totally.
Yeah, as you were speaking there, it made me think also Poor Things. I feel like that's another kind of movie about a character, a coming of age character going through different vignettes, meeting different people. And yeah, I think that's what's interesting about the introduction of the Jude Law character is that it feels like it is going to be this character that maybe teaches David about the way the world really is. And he does that a little bit, but like his functionality kind of tapers off. Like it's interesting when they leave, I forget the name of the city that they're in.
Rouge City.
Rouge City, thank you. That there's this moment where like Jude Law gets taken away by the cops, and it's sort of like, oh, David's gonna be on his own, but that's okay. He stole this copter. He's gonna get away. Oh, Jude Law, you want to get in? Oh, okay. Like I guess you're back. Like that felt like it could have been an interesting, meaningful departure of this relationship that would have revealed something clear to David about this world of like, look, like this is what happens if you don't get away. If you don't keep going, you're gonna end up like Jude Law. But then Jude Law gets to go to Manhattan, and then shortly after gets magneted away anyway. Like, it's just a weird, the way they dispatch that character, I feel like weakens some of the meaning that was starting to get created there.
His last two lines in the movie are, I was.
Yeah.
Which are really interesting and feel like they could have been the perfect thematic ending for something.
Right.
That could have been set up.
The Gigolo Joe movie. Like,
Yeah,
I think
I'm here for it,
there's
man.
a whole movie there.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get AI to generate that movie for us.
Oh, no.
Brian, what's your lesson?
Just want to say I appreciate that we brought up Forrest Gump twice, considering that was Haley Joel Osment's first way too adult kid role.
Yeah.
Aww.
Also, like we have glossed over his incredible performance because we're just used to him being amazing in movies from this era, right? But I like that Stanley Kubrick was like, we're going to need a CG or animatronic boy because like no human could pull this off, and enter Haley Joel Osment.
Totally.
But yeah, one of my notes was all the beats but without the work. And I realized that it's something I've been thinking about a lot over our past several conversations, just like story beats and pacing and the work needed to make it feel like the timing is right. And I think in the back of my mind, I always associated pacing with literal timing. Like, oh, this scene should be 90 seconds instead of 60 seconds or 90 seconds instead of 2 minutes, whatever it is. And I realized how much of it has to do with just like logical jumps and character motivation stuff and character design things, you know? So it's like Last of Us and Interstellar and La La Land and AI, all of those we talked about. Suddenly a character makes a choice to do a thing that doesn't feel right for them, and we feel like we're being thrust into the next part of the movie because the movie has to go there now, not because we feel oriented, right? And I was just thinking thinking of just random, you know, like exercises in my brain where I was just like, logistical orientation. Like if you establish that a person or a place is really hard to find, and then the characters just find it, then you just feel like, wait, what happened, right? But then if you establish a person or place is really hard to find, but then like James Bond finds it, like cut to James Bond found it already, you're like, yeah, of course he did. Because like I understand logistically that's what this character is, that's what this story world is, and you're telling me he's cooler than like the plot is allowing him to, whatever it is, right? And then character design wise, I was thinking you establish two people who are going to be romantically involved, who are like really like one just lost their partner, the other one is like really afraid, and then cut to like they're eloping in Vegas. Like unless you're doing that for comedic effect, it doesn't feel right with these characters you've established. Now you establish two characters who are totally like rash and up for anything and just goofy, and they're the ones who, and then like they elope to Vegas. You're like, yeah, that feels right for those characters, right? So it's like the actual timing and pacing time-wise can be the same, but we're not making the same like logical jumps that we have to in these movies. In these movies specifically where we're identifying like that was a problem. You know, we talked about this in Interstellar, the problem of, wait a minute, this character who believed this thing suddenly believes this other thing. Now I feel really disoriented, but then now the movie has to go into the next act. So you're taking me into the new act feeling wrong, feeling out of place, right? And this movie, AI just feels like it's that all the time. It's just like dad's like, hey, I bought us a boy. And then Monica's like, wait, what? Okay, I'll imprint, like, and then
But
it's
then
like,
dad's also like, I hate the child now, I
Right.
guess. Like,
and then like her choice to abandon him so quickly, a lot of his David's like machinations of like why his programming tell him to do this or the other thing. He's like sudden conviction that the blue fairy is like the answer to all of his problems and just like complete obsession with it without any questioning of it. The whole mechas are now aliens, could bring people back, whatever. It just always feels like it's the movie just telling us like, hey, this is what the story is now. Let's go. We got to move. We got to keep going. We got to move on to the next thing. So yeah, lesson being just sort of a not fully formed thought for me yet, but I want to keep investigating it. We're talking about Cloud Atlas next, so I'm sure that'll have some jumps. Yeah, exactly. But just realizing that a lot of these pacing and orientation issues have to do with just us not feeling like the moves that the movie has to make or the character has to make are organic, or when they are doing it to sort of throw us off the scent, it feels like, oh, we get that you were doing that, right? Like two characters who would never be in a relationship elope to Vegas, but then like that was the point. That's like the thing. They were so connected, whatever it is, like you can do something with that, but you have to do something with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about the jump 2,000 years in the future, and in a movie in which it was all building to that, I really like it. It's such a wild, big swing. And the design of the robots in the future is really strange. And there's ships that kind of float apart into little cubes. It's really cool sci-fi stuff. And in theory, I love the idea of a movie where you didn't realize it was going to do that, like doing that and going there. And I think it could have earned that jump better, once again, if more of the film earlier and more frequently was about this thing of humans realizing they're going to be outlived by the robots. They're going to be replaced by the robots. Like humans are going extinct, robots are ascendant. And the Flesh Fair is kind of about that. But I think if that was in our heads more, then when that jump happens, it's like, oh God, they actually went there. We actually are going to see what the humans are so afraid of. And that's actually happened. And that's a really awesome third act for that movie. But once again, there's 5 movies it is the third act for. And so it's disorienting and what the hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, I love the phrase, all the beats without any of the work. Like, I think that's like hits the nail on the head for me. Of like one of the hardest challenges in writing is knowing the beats you want in your story and making it feel organic and believable, making the character motivations consistent such that that story unfolds naturally. This is one of my big problems with Save the Cat. If you're using that as your only source of writing knowledge and instruction, is that it talks about the beats and the page they should happen on, but not the why, not the work that is then required to make those beats happen naturally. So thank you for introducing one of my favorite phrases.
Oh, I'm glad, and I'll credit, I think, Trisha for getting this thing going in my brain when we talked about season 1 of The Last of Us, which is beat-wise very true to the game, but it feels a little rushed some of the times in some of the ways that we're talking about. And I remember Trisha specifically saying, like, all the beats are there to sort of pay off this finale of the show. I won't spoil anything for people who haven't watched it, but like all the beats are there to sort of set up that finale. It's like, yeah, they're there, but was the work done in the show? And I think it largely was in that season, but that's the thing that we were identifying, and I think that kind of stuck in my head for the last several conversations about these beats that are there, but they don't feel like they're earned. They don't feel like they're organic. They don't feel like they're set up correctly, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I was going to talk about rules and inconsistency. I think we've talked about that a lot. And there's a lot of inconsistency in this movie about who's smart and what's real and what isn't. And just, the world makes really no sense and is constantly contradicting itself. So don't do that. I think the other thing I've been thinking about is I, as a viewer personally, want to be put into alignment with my characters, with my protagonists, and identify with them, or at least understand, be rooting for them, or be like pulled into that worldview in order to be sucked into the world. Like, I want to see it through somebody's eyes, somebody's experience. And you don't have to stick with a singular character if you're going to put the audience into alignment with that person. You can change that, and I think that's really artful storytelling. Uses that as a mechanism to surface its theme. We again have been talking about The Last of Us a lot, and The Last of Us, the game, certainly plays with who is it putting you in alignment with as a viewer. Who are you rooting for? What are you wanting to happen? Subvert that. What does that mean? And I think, as we talked about a bit in this movie, the perspective problem means that I'm constantly not in alignment with any character for very long. We talked about the problem, of the David wants to go and find the blue fairy that's going to grant him this wish. We know there isn't an actual blue fairy, so what are we actually rooting for here? So are we then in alignment with the Jude Law character? Well, kind of, but then his storyline sort of falls apart. Like there isn't a whole lot there. And even in that first 50 minutes, the family drama, I feel like I'm constantly thrown between, I'm in alignment with Monica. This is weird, husband, that you did this thing. That doesn't make any sense. I am creeped out by this child. Oh, I guess I like this child, but now I'm in alignment with David. Now I'm in alignment with Teddy. Like that is disorienting. And I think you as a storyteller should know who you are expecting the audience to be in alignment with. And if you're going to subvert that or challenge that, do it intentionally and artfully to a specific goal. And I feel like a counter argument might just be like, well, this isn't supposed to make sense. You're not supposed to feel, like there's a coherent perspective. But like, not making sense isn't hard or impressive to me. Like, instead, do something really purposefully and construct it well. And I think that will ultimately yield better results.
And just talking about the POV and the alignment in the first act, I feel like there's truly also a missed opportunity there with Monica and Henry to have like a different perspective on David from each other, and that would and a more consistent. So like right now what's happening is that Monica keeps like going back and forth where she's like, I love him, he's a human child, he's my child, and then like, no, he's a creepy robot and I don't like any of this. But what if like she represented one side of that and Henry was always like, no, I don't like this. Like she pleads with Henry to bring the child into the house. We have to have a child. I miss, our son is never going to wake up. Whatever it is. And then she's really consistent. He is our child, like imprints on him. This is a human. This is a child. We have to be understanding and treat him like a child. And then you have a really consistent, no, he isn't. And then when our child wakes up, we absolutely have to take him away because he's harmful to our family, blah, blah, blah. I just feel like if you have two characters, you could be more consistent and put us in Monica's POV if that's what you want. And then use the other one to be like, create that conflict and that tension in the dynamic and the beats, the twists and turns of that act, instead of having them both kind of waffling back and forth all the time, which that's kind of, what you're identifying there with the POV.
And I could see even working where they flip, but they just flip early on and then stay consistent from there. Where at first he's kind of excited about the technology and yada yada, and then he's creeped out while she kind of falls in love. I think that could be really interesting. But yeah, I was realizing on this viewing, the scene that kind of clinches her to imprint with him is his horrifying laugh scene.
Oh God!
Which I think like the filmmakers think it's like, oh, the family has laughed for the first time since their child got sick. Maybe is what that's supposed to be. But it's just played in such a creepy horror movie way that it just like,
and that's the burn it with fire scene.
Yeah, that's where it's like you return the child scene.
Yeah,
you do not
immediately.
Imprint. Yeah,
no,
yeah. What a fascinating movie.
Real quick, because I had the same note, Trisha, of just like I wanted to see one parent have one philosophy and one have the other, and again, switch them totally fine because you're making a point with that, right? And it's the exact same thing we talked about in Interstellar with Coop, Matthew McConaughey's character, and Anne Hathaway's character. Just like if you have them each have like a really staunch philosophy, and then have those butt each other, and if you have them switch, that's fine. Make me feel that, right? And then Michael, your thing about what you just said, like, oh, you're not supposed to feel that. You're not supposed to. Da-da. That's like my least favorite. It's not even a note. It's a response to a note when when you give like, it's like, yeah, I don't really. It's like, okay, but then make me understand that. Like, make me understand I'm supposed to feel this way, right? I always go back to No Country for Old Men. Make it clear that the thing you're doing is like opposite or subverting expectations of the thing that's supposed to be there. Not just like, yeah, I don't know, you're just not supposed, like, I just don't want it to be normal or whatever. Like, okay,
Right.
good job.
Yeah. If your goal is to be not conventional, that's not a hard target to hit.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you've hit something amazing just by missing this other thing.
Right.
Anyway, what else have you guys been watching? Trisha, what have you been watching recently?
Yeah. I don't know why I watched this. I truly don't. I don't have any idea why I watched this. I watched a movie called Deep Cover from 1992 with Jeff Goldblum and Lawrence Fishburne.
That checks out. That's a Trisha. What am I watching?
I mean,
it makes as much sense as anything else.
I had not ever heard of this before. I just was like, okay, Lawrence Fishburne, like, and Jeff Goldblum, sure, yeah, I want this. It's directed by Bill Duke, and it's Lawrence Fishburne plays a DEA agent that goes undercover, and Jeff Goldblum is like another part of the criminal underworld, and so they end up like becoming friends. Like, it's kind of a buddy movie, but it's really dark. It's a dark, like, crime thriller, more like. It's got some shades of, something like The Departed in there, where it's like someone's deep undercover and like, what are they gonna do to get out of this situation, because they can't give away that they're actually a cop, but they're having to like really embed themselves in the criminal element and like really play the part and everything. Everybody's great in it. It's a wild movie. You can't guess where it goes. It's weird. But I enjoyed it. So I guess I recommend. Yeah. Deep Cover from 1992.
Also, you said Bill Duke, and I had to look up like the Bill Duke, and yeah. Bill Duke of Predator and many other things. Yeah.
Yep.
Fascinating. Cool.
Sure is.
Yeah. Brian, what have you been watching?
I watched The Ballad of Wallace Island, which is just a movie that came out recently, and really enjoyed it. It's the plot is famous musician comes to a remote island to play a gig off the coast of Wales, to find out that the super fan who booked him is the only audience member of the gig, and he's also staying with him, and the superfan wants to like know everything about him, and then you start to learn that he lost his wife, and this is something they loved together. They also loved the work that he did with the musician did with his ex musical partner and ex romantic partner, who then shows up because she was also invited to play the gig, unbeknownst to them. Enter Carey Mulligan and her character's husband. So conflicts, whatever. And yeah, it's really entertaining and heartwarming. It's a great movie where you could watch the trailer and just be like, oh yeah, that I understand exactly what this movie is. Like, watching the movie, I was like, yep, this is the movie that the trailer told me it was going to be. So go watch the trailer. But yeah, just really entertaining and funny and really heartwarming. There's this like subgenre of movie, of thing now that's like Ted Lasso and Coda, this like, that are like, we're going to be earnest and heartfelt and kind of sentimental, but in a way that really feels earned. Like, it really feels like we're going to kind of like fight through the gauntlet to at the end make you feel like this cry was actually earned and actually came organically out of the story and the characters. as opposed to just those moments that are like just there to make you feel like we're gonna win an award or we're gonna like tug at your heartstrings just to do it, you know. And I really appreciate that. So, and this movie does a really cool thematic thing at the end. So it's probably my favorite movie of the year so far. I've only seen so many, but yeah, really enjoyed it. The Ballad of Wallace Island.
Nice.
The algorithm has really been trying to sell that movie to me, but I actually like your. Yeah, okay.
Give in.
Are you the algorithm?
Who knows?
The entity, Trisha.
The entity.
Yeah.
Or as Titus from Kimmy Schmidt calls it, the Al Gore rhythm.
Oh no.
This is a whole
Alex.
explanation.
What have you been watching recently?
So I'm finally almost entirely caught up on season 2 of Andor. I have one episode left.
Hey.
And yeah, I've had very mixed feelings about Andor. Andor is this thing that is universally loved. It's the best thing to happen to Star Wars ever in the last 20 years. It's so amazing. And in a lot of ways, watching season 1, I was agreeing with that. Like, this is amazing. Like an adult political drama in the like prequel to the original trilogy. That's like exactly everything I ever would want from a Star Wars TV show. And I just had a lot of issues with pacing and the way that the show didn't seem to like respect my time as a viewer and had a lot of these signals of prestige, which I think happens a lot in the streaming era, of amazing cinematography, way too good visual effects for a TV show, great actors, like really dramatic performances, all like put in this package that like screams prestige. And yet absolutely nothing happened in this scene and nothing moved forward in this scene. And this is the same scene as like last episode, actually, just like they're just doing it again with like different lines and feeling very frustrated with that. Season 2 of Andor began. The first 3 to 4-ish episodes were kind of putting me in that same place of like, oh, here we go again. Like, we're going to kind of just be stuck here for a while, kind of not doing anything and not moving forward. And then somewhere in the middle, it kind of finally all clicked into place and we were moving in a direction and things were happening in every scene. And all the things that were already good about it, all the prestige trappings were like better than ever. And I have to admit, like the second half of season 2 is amazing and I've really enjoyed it. And it is everything I want from a Star Wars TV show. And so like stubborn me is like, I don't want to like this show because everybody likes it for the wrong reasons. And now I think, you know, I like it. So, and the second half of the season just has like, yeah, really amazing sequences, great kind of payoffs to character arcs. And, you know, and it's nice because it is a self-contained thing. It is more like a limited series, just 2 seasons. I think they could have been 2 shorter seasons and it could have gotten to the point faster and not wallowed so much in certain, you know, periods of time. But I will admit that I think the end of the journey has made it all worth it for me, and it is pretty damn good. So
yeah, exact same feelings about both the first season and the second season. So it's like if you were like me, just sort of like, yeah, I guess I should watch the second season. Like it's worth it.
All right, I'm convinced. I will watch it, and I will report back. And we'll see if stubborn Michael can be overcome.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been pretty breathless about it. Like, I think too breathless, but I really, really like it. Like, I just like the political teeth of the show.
Yeah.
Like, I think it really, and the audacity to basically do it as a Star Wars show without anything Star Warsy in it. Like, the Force is not in it. There's no lightsabers. There's no creatures or other like it's just people.
There
it's
are
just
aliens in the background.
Like a couple.
Yeah.
But it's
yeah,
really
sometimes
just
to the point where I'm just like, why is this
a Star Wars show?
Yes. And then it'll do a thing where I'm like, okay, yeah.
And I will say that's another thing about season 2 is like as it went on, like more Star Wars things are in it. Places.
I like the non-Star Wars parts of it.
Yeah, but just places and things that are like, oh, we're actually connecting to the wider universe that I am used to. In a way that's cool, you know. So I think there's a lot about where season 2 ends up that is like, okay, we've arrived after all that, after 24 hours of content, we like did get there to this like sweet spot, which I was really, really enjoying.
It's also truly wild that it's like a $650 million just like advertisement for like a 12-year-old movie.
Yeah,
It's like
For Rogue One.
Yeah.
it's nuts.
But it looks
Yeah.
like it. I mean, like that's what's
totally
amazing
does.
is like the visual effects and just the way everything looks, especially season 2, is just way beyond any other sci-fi TV show.
Yeah.
In my house, we put on Rogue One immediately after watching the finale of Andor, and we were just like, "Holy crap!" Like it's like a seamless. It's designed for you to like immediately put on Rogue One. It's wild.
Saw that they changed the poster for Rogue One to put Andor
In
as
the
the
front.
top. That's the biggest face now.
The Disney
Mhm.
Plus catalog.
Yeah.
Michael, what have you been watching?
Right. I've been watching Hacks. It's a
Yay.
TV show that I think you've probably heard about. And I'm a little late to the party. I remember seeing the ads for it on HBO Max, and just the look of it felt like, no, this isn't for me. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. And then more people started talking about it. Alex, you were telling me about it. People were saying like, "Oh, it's fun. You got to watch it." I was skeptical. Comedy can be different. People's tastes can vary wildly when it comes to comedy. I will say the first couple episodes, it took me a little bit to be won over and to like fully buy into the world. There's some sort of things that feel a little big at times. But then other things that feel really grounded and realistic. And I was kind of struggling with like, what are you actually, show? What are you trying to be here? And ultimately, though, there was like a very clear like switch that got thrown where it was, I went from to like, oh, that was extremely good. That was a very good episode of television. And it wasn't 100% consistent, but it never drops below really, really good. And for me, some of the highs are like some of the best episodes of television I've seen in a really long time. The relationship between the central characters is unlike anything else I've seen in a long time. It's the sort of love mentorship that's a little bit toxic across generations between women. It feels well observed. It's a show about comedians and performance, and so that aspect of it, like, I find really fascinating, but also it's just deeply moving at times, and I find myself like holding back and failing from just like gushing like the emotions and the feels. So it's funny, it's extremely moving, it's very smartly executed, and it's just like lovely. It's like the most like lovely modern show. I feel like it's like, okay, we can have nice, sweet, good things in comedy in 2025, and that's really nice. So just finished season 4. As I understand it, they're going to do a season 5. Feels like maybe they could have wrapped it up.
Yeah.
TV shows need to learn when to end.
I think it's going to be the final season, is my understanding.
I feel like it has
It's still got the
should be.
juice. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the characters and the relationship is just fascinating and really, really moving.
Yeah, I watched I watched Hacks, and I just watched Shrinking a couple months ago, the first and second season. And yeah, both are comedies, but feel in that prestige sort of way where they're smarter and stuff. But they both do the thing that I think you kind of identified a little bit, where it's like there's just going to be like a really big jump, or a character is going to really conveniently say this one thing that makes another character reminded of this other thing, or like you're going to drive around and just find the person you're looking for immediately, whatever it is, like these things that just kind of feel like they're like sitcom allowed, but not these caliber of shows allowed. And it's just something that I find a little bumpy. I really enjoy both those shows, but it's just something I'm going to like keep my eye on as I keep watching this type of show.
Yeah. If we ever talk about what is TV, I want to include a section on what is sitcoms, because I feel like these shows, as you're saying, are from the lineage of sitcom, but also are super elevated in this other way. And it's sometimes that tension throws me a little bit. And I think tracking that evolution would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Not as interesting and fascinating as AI artificial intelligence. So the most interesting and fascinating film.
So fascinating.
So fascinating.
Fascinating.
Yeah. At least until next week when we're talking about Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
That's going to be truly
We're just going to
fascinating.
keep
What did
upping
we
the
do with this
ante.
season?
I don't
Yeah.
know. The middle here, we have an interesting midpoint.
We are
to our
ratcheting
season,
up.
Yes.
Where it's like crazy
Interstellar, La La
sci-fi
Land.
and La La Land and Romeo and Juliet and Pulp
Yeah.
Fiction.
Let's.
Yes. Cloud Atlas is going to be a Patreon exclusive episode. So that's going to be really fun to talk about. We can
Yeah.
let our hair down and really talk about all the Tom Hanks, all the different versions of.
There's going to be so much to say. I don't know how we're going to fit it all into an episode. It's too much.
Yeah. It's going to be great. We're going to do it.
I still haven't seen it. What could you possibly be talking about?
Prepare yourself. You can't. Don't try.
Yeah.
Real quick, I said to my partner, "Have you seen this movie?" She said, "No." I said, "I'm going to show you the trailer, and you tell me whether you want to watch it or not." And the trailer's like Halle Berry listening to a record, and she's like, "I know this song." And they're like, "Well, there's only so many." And she's like, "No, but I know." And she's like, "Oh yeah, of course, I totally want to watch this movie." I'm like, just wait. and then the trailer is like every other thing that exists in the movie. She's like, "Okay, still yes, but that's not what I was expecting."
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. A big swing it is. This has been our conversation about AI, artificial intelligence. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. If you want to help us make more episodes and get fun perks, access to our back catalog, ad-free episodes, head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon. As I said, that's where we will be releasing our Cloud Atlas episode next week as well. We want to say a thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editors, Vicki Lewis, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker. I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you next week for our discussion of Cloud Atlas.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.